In this chapter, we are going to define the ethics, its importance, and ethical theories. We all know that ethics is not new for people in business. The corporate world has always had some rules, standards, and norms for doing business. However, these are generally changing with some social and cultural basis which can be differ from country to country. So, what is ethics and the why? So ethics is a set of rules prescribing what is good or evil, or what is right or wrong for people. While in business, it shows a corporation how to behave properly in their own business and operations. Business ethics means honesty, confidence, respect, and fair acting in all circumstances. It is also the natural and structural process of acting in line with moral judgments and standards and rules. Business ethics is the honest, respect, and fair conduct by business and its representatives in all of its relations. That is according to ours of 2006. Well, ethics serves as a guide to moral daily living and it helps judge whether our behavior can be justified. And now let's move on to the ethical philosophies or the ethical theories. And its four broad categories includes deontological, utilitarianism, theological ethics, ethical relativism, and ethical objectivism. But first, what is ethical philosophies or the ethical theories and how does it affect individuals? Well, ethical theories provide part of the decision-making foundation for the decision-making, wherein ethics are in play because these theories represents the viewpoints from which individuals seek guidance as they make decisions. Each theory emphasizes different points, a different decision-making style or decision rules, and one of the components of a changing to concern with social responsibility and accountability has been the recognition of the importance of ethical and organizational activity and in behavior. In part, this can be considered to be a recognition of the changing societal movement of the present time and in part of the recognition of the problem brought through corporate activity taken without any account of ethical implications. The first ethical philosophy is the deontological ethics. According to deontologists, certain actions are right or wrong in themselves, and so they are absolute ethical standards which need to be upheld. It is closely associated with Immanuel Kant's model of ethical theory. It argues that the morality, that is, the rightness or wrongness of a human act, depends on whether such acts fulfills a duty or not rather than on its consequences. For example, people have the obligation to tell the truth even if doing so might produce some unfavorable results. In other words, as Kant would have us believe, telling the truth is always right in itself, even if again, doing so produced some unfavorable results. Hence, telling a lie on the contrary is always wrong for deontological ethics. For instance, a physician has just discovered that her patient is having a stage 4 breast cancer. However, the physician cannot divulge the truth to her patient right away because the latter is having a cardiac condition as well. If we are to consider the consequences of the act of telling the truth to the patient, the latter may have a sudden cardiac arrest and eventually die. From the point of view of deontological ethics, telling the patient about her real condition is the right thing to do, even if doing so may result in cardiac arrests. In deontological ethics, therefore, before we make moral decisions, we have to consider first which actions are right and wrong and proceed from there. And if an action is right in itself, then we have the duty or the moral obligation to act on it. But if an action is wrong in itself, then we are under a moral obligation to act accordingly. Second theory is the theological ethics, which distinguish between the right and the good, with the right encompassing those actions which maximize the good. Thus, it is outcomes which determine what is right rather than the inputs or our actions in terms of ethical standards. And for the better understanding, about theological ethics, let's watch this video.
Today, we will be exploring Aristotle's teleological ethics. Teleological ethics is named after teleology. But what is teleology exactly? Teleology suggests that everything we do has a purpose. Actions aren't done just for the sake of being done, but they actually aim at something. According to Aristotle, every action and purpose may be said to aim at some good. Therefore, every action that we do aims at achieving a supreme good, and this is our general purpose. That being said, with knowledge of the supreme good, we will have a mark at which to aim, and therefore a better chance of attaining what we want, and finding what we are meant to do in this life. Another prominent aspect of Aristotle's ethics is human excellence. When someone strives to find their purpose or the supreme good, they develop good habits to help them get there. We call these good habits virtues, as they describe what it best means to be human. Acting virtuously may include allowing reason to control our actions so we become ethical people, or doing just acts so that we become just people. When we act virtuously, it contributes to the pursuit of happiness, another foundation of Aristotle's teachings. According to Aristotle, happiness does not equate to pleasure. Pleasure is only momentary. Happiness is not, as it is not a feeling but an enduring state achieved when someone performs, over time, the most perfect of typically human tasks. Therefore, happiness can only be found in the context of a community, as we need other people in order to find good tasks to perform. Aristotle also talked a lot about a concept called the mean. He made it very clear that excess is bad and that instead, we should maintain a balance in everything that we do and stay in the middle. For example, if we were to stay within the mean, we would be brave when necessary, but we wouldn't go and try and fight 7 dragons at once because that's just being unnecessarily brave. So if we were to choose one person to receive a hypothetical Aristotle Person of the Year award, who would it be? One potential candidate that you may have heard of is Malala Yousafzai. Malala lived in Pakistan as a young girl. When the local Taliban had banned girls from attending school, she wrote and spoke out about her experiences, even though doing so was very, very dangerous. Malala soon became an advocate for female education locally and internationally. She continued to do so even after being shot in the head for her advocacy. Her habitual choosing of contributing to the supreme good, despite personal setbacks, represents her virtuous character, as well as her comprehension of her purpose in this life, all of things which Aristotle advocated for. Even after the fame that accompanied her actions, Malala finished high school and is currently studying at university, while still heading her non-profit organization. This represents her ability to live within the mean. There is, however, a second candidate eligible for the award, and it is none other than Ryan Hurljack. In the first grade, Ryan's class started a fundraiser to build a well that would give a village in Africa access to clean water. However, Ryan was astounded to find out the number of people who didn't have access to clean water, and thought, why stop there? After countless household chores, speaking out to the community, and making connections, Ryan fundraised enough money to build a well at a primary school in Uganda, eventually establishing the Ryan's Well Foundation in 2001. Ryan, similar to Malala, understood that we should continuously aim at contributing to the supreme good, and did so by bringing clean water to various communities in need. The fact that he didn't settle for just a regular school fundraiser and instead made a habit of working to help others demonstrates that he developed a virtuous character over time and lived up to Aristotle's vision of human excellence. Ryan also proved Aristotle's teaching that happiness is best found in community, as his selfless efforts to bring happiness also joined various communities together in the process. That's it. Thank you for listening, and remember that you could always be the next candidate for the Aristotle Person of the Year.
The third one is utilitarianism. It is based upon the premise that outcomes are all that matter in determining what is good, and the way in which a society achieves its ultimate good is through each person pursuing his or her self-interests. For better understanding about the utilitarianism, let's watch this. Utilitarianism is an ethical theory that determines right from wrong by focusing on outcomes. It is a form of consequentialism. Utilitarianism holds that the most ethical choice is the one that will produce the greatest good for the greatest number. It is the only moral framework that can be used to justify military force or war. It is also the most common approach to moral reasoning used in business because of the way in which it accounts for cost and benefits. However, because we cannot predict the future, it's difficult to know with certainty whether the consequences of our actions will be good or bad. It is one of the limitations of utilitarianism. It also has trouble of accounting for values such as justice and individual rights. For example, assume a hospital has 4 people whose lives depends upon receiving organ transplants: a heart, a lungs, a kidney, and a liver. If a healthy person wanders into the hospital, his organs could be harvested to save 4 lives at the expense of 1 life. This would arguably produce the greatest good for the greatest number. But few would consider it an acceptance course of action, let alone the most ethical one. So although utilitarianism is arguably the most reason-based approach to determining the right and wrong, it has obviously limitations. Next is the ethical relativism, that posits that there are no universally valid moral principles, and it is subdivided into 2: the conventionalism, which says the mores and standards of a society that defines what is moral behavior and ethical standards are set, not absolutely, but according to the dictates of a given society at a given time. Next is the subjectivism, which views that there are no ethical truths, only subjective ethical sentiments. For example, when we travel to a foreign country, we tend to take with us the ethical standards of our own country rather than changing to the different standards of the country which we are visiting. Just like the picture shown, we Filipinos, when we visit the other country, we tend to take with us our own culture which we use the mano po to respect the elderly. Lastly is the ethical objectivism. It is in direct opposition to ethical relativism. It asserts that although moral principles may differ between cultures, some moral principles have universal validity whether or not they are universally recognized. It is subdivided into 2. The first one is the strong ethical objectivism, which argues that there is one true moral system. Second is weak ethical objectivism, which holds that there is a core morality of universally valid moral principles, but also accepts an intermediate area where relativism is accepted. In conclusion, we can see that each of these theories of ethical is problematical and that there is no overarching principles which determines either what is ethical or what is not. Nevertheless, a concern with ethics has been introduced explicitly into organization theory and strategy in recent years. This has to lead in an increase of corporate social responsibility.